It was Thanksgiving, the crisp November air seeping through the windows of my small suburban home. I had spent the entire morning preparing the feast. Turkey roasted to golden perfection, mashed potatoes whipped until creamy, and pumpkin pies lined neatly on the counter. At 72, I prided myself on carrying on family traditions. My son, Michael, and his family were supposed to arrive at 5 p.m. sharp. But as the clock ticked past 5:30, I noticed my daughter-in-law, Sarah, standing in the doorway. Her expression was sharp, almost cruel. She walked past the table, eyes scanning the spread, and then she turned to me. "Is this what you call food?" she shouted, voice echoing in the silent dining room. For a moment, I froze, my hand hovering over the silver gravy boat. My heart sank. The room, which I had imagined filled with laughter and warmth, now felt cold and hostile. Michael didn't even look up from his phone, nodding slightly, but saying nothing. I swallowed the sting of humiliation and smiled calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. Instead, I quietly excused myself to the kitchen, wiped the tears I hadn't let fall, and carried the platter back to the counter. As I arranged the dishes with deliberate care, I realized something. This was not about the turkey, nor the mashed potatoes, nor even the pumpkin pie. This was about control. This was about their attempt to make me feel small, invisible, insignificant. I looked at the untouched cranberry sauce and the green beans that no one would eat with their sharp remarks, and I made a decision. From now on, my actions would be guided not by the hope of their approval, but by the preservation of my dignity. And I knew that one day, they would realize that kindness is not weakness, patience is not surrender, and respect, once lost, can only be regained by those who recognize it too late. Part 2. Lingering doubts and hidden tensions. The house felt unusually silent after Sarah's outburst. I busied myself clearing the dishes, each clink of porcelain sounding painfully loud in the still room. Michael's footsteps were faint as he retreated to the living room, phone in hand, eyes glued to the screen. I could feel the tension curling around the edges of the kitchen, thick and invisible. I recalled past Thanksgiving dinners, laughter, stories, clinking glasses. And now, that warmth was replaced by a cold, calculated distance. I began to notice the small things: Sarah's deliberate ignoring of the pumpkin pie I had baked, her subtle eye rolls at my cranberry sauce, and Michael nodding silently instead of defending me. I wondered, not for the first time, if this was intentional. Did they plan to make me feel small, invisible? As I wiped the counters, I caught my reflection in the window, a weary face framed by silver hair, eyes tired but alert. I was determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I poured myself a cup of tea, the steam curling like a silent reminder that I was still here, still present. My hands trembled slightly, but I steadied them. It was not the food that mattered, but my dignity. The room remained quiet, but I felt a resolve solidifying within me. This Thanksgiving, the battle had only begun. Part 3. The tense family dinner. By the time the dinner plates were set, the air was thick with tension. I had cooked every dish with care, from the cranberry-glazed turkey to the roasted vegetables, yet the room felt hostile rather than warm. Michael barely glanced up from his phone as he slid into his chair, and Sarah's gaze cut across the table like a knife. "Did you make this yourself?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp and condescending. I nodded politely, keeping my hands steady, trying not to let my heart show how much her words stung. She scoffed and picked up her fork, stabbing a bite of turkey with exaggerated disdain. I remembered previous Thanksgiving dinners, the laughter of children, the stories, and the clinking of glasses. Those memories contrasted sharply with the icy silence now. Every smile I attempted seemed to be met with a smirk or eye roll. Even Michael remained silent, his expression guarded, as though he had forgotten how to be a son in the presence of his wife. I took a deep breath and silently reminded myself. The goal was to maintain my dignity. I poured myself a glass of cider, lifting it with grace, acknowledging my presence in the room without submission. Sarah continued to criticize the presentation, the taste, and even the aroma of the food. Each comment was like a small dagger, meant to belittle, yet I did not react beyond a calm nod. As the meal continued, I observed the subtle interactions, the glances, the sighs, the whispered comments. It was clear that Sarah had orchestrated this display. This was not a random outburst. It was a strategic maneuver to assert dominance, to isolate me. And though it hurt, I let it wash over me like water off stone, preparing for the quiet power I intended to reclaim. Part 4. Memories and Realizations. After the tense dinner, I retreated to the living room, sitting quietly on the edge of the sofa. The flickering light of the fireplace cast shadows across the room, mirroring the turmoil inside me. I closed my eyes and allowed memories to surface. Thanksgivings past, the laughter of children, the aroma of my husband's favorite stuffing filling the air. I remembered how Michael once climbed into my lap as a boy, seeking comfort after nightmares, how we would plan every holiday together, laughing and sharing stories. Those moments had once defined our family. But over the years, after Sarah had entered the picture, things had shifted subtly. The warmth, once abundant, had become strained. I had ignored the small signs at first, the subtle comments, the excuses, the diminishing phone calls. Now I understood. This wasn't about a single outburst at the dinner table. It was about a pattern, a deliberate erasure of the role I had played in my family's life. The sting of betrayal was sharp, but clarity was sharper. I would not react impulsively. Instead, I would gather evidence, observe carefully, and plan my response with measured precision. The quiet strength that had carried me through decades of life was reawakening. I sipped my tea slowly, letting it calm my racing thoughts. There would be a time for confrontation, but for now, I would stand tall in the shadow of my own dignity. Part 5. Quiet Observations and Strategic Planning. The days following Thanksgiving were filled with quiet observation. I went about my daily routines, preparing meals and tidying the house, but my eyes and ears were alert. I watched Sarah and Michael, noting subtle gestures, hushed conversations, and the small manipulations designed to undermine me. In the evenings, I would sit in the living room with a notebook, recording each slight, each condescending remark, every instance where my contributions were minimized or ignored. I remembered the wisdom of my late husband, Elliot. Patience is power, and knowledge is armor. With each observation, I began to see patterns emerge. It was clear now that the coldness, the dismissive behavior, the deliberate marginalization were all calculated. Rather than confront them impulsively, I planned. I would gather the evidence and document every slight with precision. One day, when the time was right, I would assert myself not with anger, but with undeniable proof of the years of care, sacrifice, and love that had been ignored. I reminded myself that my dignity was non-negotiable. The house might be theirs to enter, the table theirs to sit at, but the respect owed to me was mine to claim. And in that knowledge, I found a quiet satisfaction and a growing resolve that would guide the actions yet to come. Part 6. The first subtle move. A few days after my careful observations, I decided it was time to test the waters. I invited Michael to join me for a quiet coffee in the sunroom, away from Sarah's watchful eyes. I spoke gently, asking about his work and reminiscing about small family moments, watching his responses closely. His guarded demeanor faltered when I mentioned memories of past Thanksgivings, his childhood stories, and his father's gentle guidance. I noticed the way he hesitated before responding, the flicker of guilt in his eyes. It was a subtle opening, a crack in the wall they had built around me. I did not press too hard, but I let the conversation linger in a space of shared history and affection. In the kitchen later, I arranged the dinner for the week with care, intentionally setting the table in the style Michael remembered from childhood. Little details, the placement of cutlery, the choice of favorite dishes, were all small reminders of the life we had shared, the traditions that I had preserved for decades. This was my first move, gentle yet deliberate, a soft reclaiming of influence and respect. I reminded myself that true power was in patience, in the measured return of dignity rather than confrontation. And as I cleaned the dishes afterward, I felt a quiet confidence building within me. This was the first step of many, and I was finally beginning to reclaim my rightful place in the family. Part 7. Building Tension and Strategic Positioning. The following week, the subtle tension in the house was palpable. I continued my daily routines, but added small, deliberate gestures, leaving personal notes for Michael reminding him of shared childhood memories, preparing his favorite snacks just the way he liked, and placing old family photographs in prominent spots around the living room. Each act was a silent assertion of presence, a quiet reclaiming of influence without confrontation. At dinner, Sarah's critical remarks were sharper than before, but I maintained a composed demeanor. I asked questions about Michael's day, subtly steering conversations toward moments that reminded him of our family history. I noticed fleeting glances from him, a softening in his tone when he recounted stories from his youth, a hesitation before agreeing with Sarah's scorn. In these moments, I began to sense the first cracks in their united front. They had built walls around me, but the walls were not impenetrable. My patience, subtle reminders, and the careful reconstruction of cherished memories were opening avenues for dialogue, for reconnection, for influence to flow back into my sphere. Though the tension was still high, I felt a renewed sense of control. This was the delicate stage before the larger confrontation, a time to prepare mentally, to gather my evidence, and to solidify my position. Every small gesture, every careful observation, was a step toward reclaiming the respect that had been denied to me for so long. Vietnamese version /Tieng Viet. Tuan Tip Theo, Kong Kai Song Tang Tin Ti Trong Na Tiaro Nun Aro Ret. Tua Van Tu Kien Kak Song Vi Kangay and Hung Them Veo, and Hung Siu Chi No, Ko Chu Y. Dalai and Hung Ghi Chuka, Nin Cho Michael Nak V, KYUC Thoi Tho, Chuan Bai and Hung Mon and Vat U Tit Kwa Ka I Dung Catch. Badat and Hung Buck on Jia Din Siu, O and Hung 6 Tri Noi Bat Trong Fong Kok. Muahan Dong Lai Mot Catch King Din Su Hien Dien Lang Lo. Mot Catch Lay Lai on Hung Ma Kong Kan Doi Dao. Trong Bua Toi. In Hung Loi Chi Trick Kwa Sarah Sak Han Truok. In Hung Tua, Then Jutai Du Diem Tin. Tua Hoi Ve Gay Kwa Michael. Kio Leo Chi and Hung Ka Chi and Ve. In Hung Koan Kok Nak No Ka I Ve Lich Sujia Din. Tuan and Theon Mat Thoang Kwa Tu Ka I. Jong Noi Mem D Kai Ka Kavi Tuoi Tho. Vasu Du Truok Kai Dong Y Voi and Hung Loi Mia My Kwa Sarah. Trong and Hung Koan Kok Nai. Tua Bat Dao Cam, Nan and Hung Ki Ho Dao Tien Trong Hong Rao Ma Jose Dung Sung Quan Tua. Hoda Dung Lin and Hung Buk Tuong. In Hung Buk Tuong Kong Phi La Kong the Shuyan Thong. Su Kien Nan. In Hung Nak No Tin Ti. Vavik Tai Hien Kindan in Hung Kyuc, Qui Jia Dang Morat, Ko Hoi Cho Su Doi Thoi. Kit Noi Von Hung Taro Lai Voi Tua. Makdut Song Tang Van Chao. Tua Kam Thay Su Kim Sot Mwami. De La Jai Don Tin Ti Truok Kai Doi Dao Lon Han. Thoi Diem Chuan by V Tin Then. Thursday Thap Bang Chung Va Kung Ko 6 the Kwamin. Moi Siu Chi No. Moi Quan Sat Kan Then La Mot Buk Hung Toi Vik Lay Lai Su Tun Trongda by Fu Nin Bei Lao. Fan 7 de Duok Hon Tien. Tap Trung Veo Zedung Song Tang Tin Ti Va Kung Ko 6 the Chien Luok Quan Nan Vat Chin. Ket Kwa Song Guan, Viet. Tip Tuc Dong Bo Nan Vat Va Bio I Can. Ban Kom Yuan Tua Tip Tuc Viet Fan 8 de Fat Trien Buk Chuan by Cho Chao Treo. Bao Gom Kak Dao Hu Chuan by Fan Song Va Kai Thok Bang Chung Kwa, Nan Vat Chin Kong. Part 8. Gathering Evidence and Silent Preparation English Version. The following days were filled with careful observation and quiet documentation. I kept a journal, noting every dismissive comment from Sarah, every subtle look Michael cast in her direction, every moment my efforts were ignored or belittled. I organized photographs, receipts, and letters from past holidays and family gatherings, creating a timeline of devotion, care, and sacrifice that had been overlooked. I continued to maintain my daily routines, preparing meals, keeping the house tidy, but each action was now purposeful, designed to remind them subtly of the life I had built for our family. The more I watched, the more patterns emerged, revealing the calculated ways they attempted to control the household and my role within it. I also began to strategize. Every observation, every piece of evidence, was a tool for the day I would assert myself. I didn't seek confrontation yet. Instead, I built a silent archive of truth, ready to present when the moment was right. My patience was becoming a shield, my careful planning a weapon of dignity. In quiet moments, I reflected on my past years, the love and care I had poured into this family, and resolved that I would not let these deliberate slights go unanswered. The groundwork was laid, the stage was set, and I knew that when the time came, the balance would shift in my favor. Part 9. The first subtle confrontation. Several days later, an opportunity presented itself. Michael and Sarah were arguing quietly in the living room over holiday plans. I remained in the kitchen, pretending to be busy, yet I listened carefully. Sarah made a dismissive comment about my efforts in past family gatherings, assuming I wouldn't hear it. I calmly walked into the room, carrying a tray with dessert, and smiled at both of them. "I heard that," I said softly but firmly. The room went still. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Michael looked away, caught off guard. I did not raise my voice. I did not accuse. I presented the facts subtly, referencing past events, showing that I had noticed the patterns, the dismissals, and the manipulations. My calm confidence contrasted with their discomfort. For the first time in weeks, they were aware that I was fully present, fully aware, and unwilling to be overlooked. It was a small victory, almost imperceptible, yet it set the stage for what was to come. They could no longer take my patience for granted. The foundation for a larger, more direct assertion of my dignity was quietly laid. Part 10. The first major confrontation. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when I decided to take a bolder step. The family had gathered in the living room, the air thick with their chatter. I called Michael and Sarah aside, inviting them to sit with me at the kitchen table. I took a deep breath and calmly laid out a few of the pieces of evidence I had been collecting: photographs from past holidays, handwritten notes, and receipts that documented the care I had poured into the family over the years. Sarah's eyes widened as she glanced over the materials. Michael shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting my gaze. I spoke with measured calm, explaining how the dismissive behavior and deliberate slights had affected me, but without raising my voice. My presence, quiet yet assertive, created a new dynamic. For the first time, they saw that their actions had consequences, that the person they thought would remain passive had been watching, listening, and preparing. I did not accuse, I did not yell. Instead, I presented facts with quiet authority, allowing the weight of truth to speak for itself. Their discomfort was palpable, a tangible shift in the atmosphere. The seeds of accountability were planted. I felt the balance of power begin to tip, not through confrontation, but through presence, patience, and undeniable evidence. Part 11. The climactic revelation. Weeks of patient observation and careful documentation culminated in the moment I had been preparing for. Michael and Sarah were in the living room, discussing upcoming holiday plans, when I calmly entered with a folder of organized evidence. I placed it on the coffee table and looked at them steadily. "I've kept track of everything," I said softly but firmly. "Every slight, every dismissive remark, every moment my contributions were overlooked. I think it's time we acknowledge the truth." Sarah's face paled, and Michael's posture stiffened. They realized that the years of passive endurance they expected from me were over. I did not shout. I did not accuse in anger. Instead, I let the documents speak for themselves: photographs, notes, receipts, all a tangible chronicle of my care, love, and dedication. For the first time, the room felt balanced. I had reclaimed my voice, and with it, my authority. Their discomfort was palpable, a quiet acknowledgement that my presence could not be ignored. The silent power I had cultivated over weeks now manifested fully. I smiled, calm, dignified, and fully in control. Part 12. Resolution and reflection. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Sarah and Michael were quieter, more cautious in their remarks, aware now that their actions could not undermine my presence. I continued my daily routines, but with a newfound sense of authority and calm. I reflected on the journey, the humiliation, the observation, the subtle strategies, and finally the gentle but undeniable assertion of my place in the family. I realized that patience and preparation were more powerful than immediate confrontation. True dignity was maintained not through anger, but through quiet, measured action. As the holiday season progressed, I found small joys in the restored balance: shared laughter during meals, acknowledgement of my contributions, and a renewed connection with Michael. I understood that respect, once lost, can be reclaimed thoughtfully and persistently. In the end, I had not only regained my voice and authority, but also demonstrated to my family that kindness, patience, and careful action can restore what was once threatened. My heart felt lighter, and I embraced the knowledge that, even in the face of betrayal, one can reclaim their rightful place with grace and composure.